A life of a warlock is one of pure suffering, but not in the way you would expect. I remember how it began, not with thunder or revelation, but with hunger, the kind that gnaws not at the belly, but at the mind. I was nothing then. A scholar without patrons, a researcher without resources, a man of intellect reduced to counting copper in a rented room above an alehouse in Waterdeep. The scrolls I cherished most were not of ancient wisdom but of mounting debt. The greatest spell I knew was how to make mouldy bread taste fresh for one more night. Knowledge was my obsession, my love, my torment. I had spent years tracing the faintest threads of arcane theory through dusty tomes, believing that true power lay in understanding. But understanding requires access, and access requires gold. The College of New Olam had rejected my applications thrice, each time with increasingly formal language that failed to mask the simple truth. I was common, unconnected, unwanted. Winter came harshly that year. The sea winds cut through my threadbare robes as I wandered the docks, watching merchant ships unload their exotic cargo from distant shores. Silks from Kalimshan, spices from Chult, and books. So many books, bound for private collections I would never be permitted to enter. The old woman appeared as if formed from the mist itself, hunched and swaddled in ragged layers of midnight blue, her face hidden beneath a deep hood. She extended a gnarled finger toward me. Scholar without school, seeker without sight. Her voice carried no accent I recognized, yet felt ancient as the stones beneath our feet. Your questions burn so loudly I can hear them across the plains. I should have walked away. Any man with sense would have marked her as deranged and continued on. But desperation recognizes opportunity in shapes that comfort would flee from. What do you know of my questions? I challenged, pulling my thin cloak tighter. She laughed, a sound like distant breaking glass. And everything. Come. I followed her through winding alleys that seemed to fold in upon themselves. Passages I had never noticed, despite years of walking these same streets. We descended stairs carved directly into bedrock, the walls around us growing older with each step down. The architecture shifted from Waterdeep's familiar styles to something primordial, symbols carved by hands that predated the city's founding. In a chamber hewn from black stone, she finally turned to face me. As she pulled back her hood, I saw not the crone I expected, but a woman ageless and terrible in her beauty. Her skin was the color of smoke. Her eyes reflected light that had no source in that lightless place. Corin Vale, she said, and hearing my name in her mouth sent ice through my veins. You wish to understand the fabric of reality, the mechanics of magic, the architecture of creation itself. How do you know my name? I whispered. I know the names of all who might serve. Her smile revealed teeth too numerous, too sharp. The question is, what price you are willing to pay for what you seek? I knew then what she was, or rather, what she was not. No mortal being stood before me, but an emissary of something greater and more terrible. In my studies, I had read of such pacts, whispers of warlocks, scholars who bypassed the tedious decades of conventional magical study by forming bonds with entities of immense power. What entity do you represent? I asked, professional curiosity momentarily overcoming fear. The whispering star, the void between thoughts, the memory that waits. She circled me slowly. Names are irrelevant. Results are what matter. And you, Corin Vale, have reached the limit of what your mortal resources can achieve. She was right. I had exhausted every conventional path available to a man of my station. The great wizards would never accept me as apprentice. The colleges would never open their restricted archives to me. What would be required of me? The question emerged from my lips before I had consciously decided to ask it. Devotion. service, a binding of essence. She produced a small obsidian blade from within her robes, and blood, freely given. Not much, just enough to forge the initial connection. I hesitated, but only briefly. What alternatives remained? Return to my cold room. Continue transcribing minor cantrips for merchants who needed magical signatures on contracts. Slowly watch my mind, my greatest asset, dull from disuse. And in return? I asked. Knowledge beyond mortal understanding. Power that academic mages spend lifetimes failing to grasp. And most precious of all, Corin Vale, access. The barriers between you and what you seek will dissolve like mist before the sun. I extended my hand. The blade was sharp, the cut almost painless. My blood fell not to the floor but hung suspended in the air between us, forming symbols I almost recognized before rearranging into patterns that hurt my eyes. "The pact is sealed," she whispered. "The star now knows your name." I felt something settle into me, a weight and presence behind my thoughts. A door unlocked in my mind, revealing corridors of knowledge I had never imagined could exist. Formulas, incantations, and truths about the nature of reality flooded my consciousness. I gasped, overwhelmed by sudden understanding. When my vision cleared, the chamber was empty. I stood alone, a small leather-bound book at my feet that had not been there before. Its cover bore no title, only a symbol resembling a star with too many points, each trailing into darkness. I climbed the stairs back to familiar streets, the book clutched tightly to my chest. The winter air no longer bit at my skin. I felt warmed from within by the power now coursing through me. The pact seemed so simple then. Power for devotion, knowledge for service. I did not understand the true cost. How could I? The price was designed to be paid so gradually that the debtor would not notice until the payment was nearly complete. The first year was glorious. The book served as my grimoire, pages filling with spells and insights whenever I opened it. I learned to call forth blasts of crackling energy, to bend shadows to my will, to speak with beings from beyond the veil of reality. My patron, whom I came to call the Whispering Star for lack of a better name, communicated through dreams and subtle intuitions. I secured proper lodgings. I dressed in robes of quality. I began to build a reputation as a scholar of rare insight. Those who had dismissed me now sought my counsel. I received invitations to lecture at the very institutions that had rejected my applications. The first sign that something was amiss came on an autumn morning. I sat at my writing desk, corresponding with a sage from Silvery Moon regarding a particularly obscure elven divination technique. I mentioned my mother's teachings on meditative focus, then stopped, quill hovering above parchment. My mother. I could not picture her face. I set down the quill, closed my eyes, and concentrated. I remembered a woman, tall and slender. I remembered a voice, gentle but firm, but her features remained shrouded, as if viewed through thick fog. Had she worn her hair long or short? What color were her eyes? These details, once as familiar as my own reflection, had somehow slipped away. A momentary lapse, I told myself. Fatigue from late nights of study, nothing to concern myself with. I completed the letter without further reference to my family. 3 days later, a colleague mentioned the University of Morgard, asking if I had studied there. "I have never heard of such a place," I replied. He looked at me strangely. "You spoke at length about your time there just last week. You described the alabaster towers and the library built into the mountainside." I laughed it off. "You must have confused me with someone else." But when he left, unease settled over me. I had no memory of this conversation. University of Morgard. Yet as I spoke the name aloud, There was a faint resonance, the echo of something once known. The incidents multiplied. I would find notes in my own handwriting that I had no recollection of writing. I would greet people who called me by name, who referenced conversations we had apparently shared, none of which I could recall. I began to keep a journal, meticulously recording each day's events, conversations, and discoveries. I read it each morning upon waking, trying to stitch together the continuity of my life from these written fragments. Some days, entire weeks, would be documented that I could not remember living. One night, I dreamed of the chamber where I had made my pact. The ageless woman stood before me, but now her face was partially my own, as if our features had been imperfectly combined. "You are progressing well," she said, her voice overlapping with another that might have been mine. "The star is pleased." "What is happening to me?" I asked. "My memories. They slip away like water." "All power requires sacrifice," she replied. "You feed the star with what you no longer need." "I did not agree to this," I protested. Her laugh echoed through the dream space. "You agreed to binding of essence. What is memory, if not the essence of self? Be grateful, Corin Vale. Most patrons demand the soul. The star has more refined tastes." I awoke, gasping, the dream more vivid than the previous day's actual events. I immediately reached for my journal, needing to record this revelation before it too could be taken from me. As I opened it, I saw that pages had been torn out, months of entries, gone. In their place was a single line, written in my hand but with subtle differences, as if someone had almost perfectly imitated my penmanship. "What you forget, I become." Fear drove me to action. I spent days researching my condition, hunting for precedents in accounts of other warlocks and their patrons. I found disturbingly little. Most scholarly works focused on the powers gained, the spells mastered, the otherworldly entities served. Few addressed the personal cost beyond vague warnings about corruption of the soul. None mentioned the theft of memory. I sought out a temple of Ogma, god of knowledge, hoping his clerics might offer insight or protection. As I approached the temple steps, pain lanced through my head, dropping me to my knees. A voice that was and was not my own whispered directly into my mind. "Our pact forbids this path. The gods cannot help what belongs to the star." I awoke hours later in my own bed, a full day lost. My journal now contained a detailed account of a meeting with merchants that had apparently occupied my missing time. The handwriting was mine, but I had no memory of the event or of writing the entry. Paranoia became my constant companion. I began to leave messages for myself, hidden throughout my home. Notes detailing who I was, what had happened to me, warnings about the true nature of my pact. I concealed them in books, under floorboards, sewn into the linings of my robes. Most disappeared within days. Those that remained often changed. The warnings replaced with mundane reminders or academic notes. My own home became a battleground between what remained of my true self and whatever was gradually replacing me. Yet even as my sense of self eroded, my arcane power grew exponentially. Spells that master wizards struggled with came naturally to me. I could perceive the layered structure of enchantments, unraveling and reconstructing them with ease. I developed magical innovations that earned me renown throughout the Sword Coast. When I lectured, students and scholars alike sat entranced. My insights into the fundamental nature of magic were revolutionary. What none of them knew, what I barely admitted to myself, was that these brilliances were not entirely mine. They came from the spaces where my memories had been, filled instead with knowledge alien and profound. In my more lucid moments, I understood the terrible exchange taking place. With each spell cast, with each invocation of my patron's power, I surrendered another fragment of myself. The whispering star fed not on my soul, but on my history, my connections, my human context. My reflection began to trouble me. Each morning, the face in the mirror looked less like the one I remembered. The changes were subtle. A slightly different angle to the jaw. Eyes spaced a breath wider. A mouth that smiled differently than I intended. Who are you becoming? I asked my reflection one dawn, after waking from dreams filled with stars that spoke in voices made of absence. Someone better, my reflection answered, though my lips had not moved. Someone unburdened by the trivial anchors of human experience. I stumbled back from the mirror, heart pounding. The reflection watched me with calm interest. Head tilted at an angle my neck could not achieve. It said, "Knowledge for service, power for devotion. You wanted to transcend ordinary limitations. That is exactly what is happening. I wanted to enhance my life, not lose it," I whispered. "What is lost is merely transformed." My reflection smiled. "The star remembers everything you forget. Nothing is truly gone." "Then, give my memories back," I demanded. "They are being put to better use." The reflection's voice deepened, resonating with multiple tones. "Consider what you have gained, Corin. You who were nothing, who begged for scraps from the table of knowledge. Now, archbishops and archmages seek your counsel. Your name will echo through history. A name without a self behind it means nothing. Self is an illusion. All mortals eventually surrender." The reflection's features shifted subtly as I watched, becoming less and less mine. "Most surrender it to death. You surrender it to transcendence." I placed my hand against the mirror, and my reflection did the same. But where my palm pressed against cold glass, I felt the sensation of touching warm flesh. I jerked back. "What will remain of me?" I asked. "Everything important," the reflection assured me. "The star has no interest in your capacity for magic, your intellectual brilliance, your ambition. Only the hindrances will be pruned away. Sentimental attachments, moral hesitations, the grief and longing that consume so much mortal energy. Those things make me human." "Precisely." The reflection nodded. "And humanity is what you were so eager to transcend that night in the chamber beneath Waterdeep." I could not argue. Had I not resented my human limitations, the slowness of conventional learning, the barriers of class and connection, the frailty of a body that required rest when the mind wished to continue its pursuits? The reflection sensed my wavering. The transformation is already well advanced. Fighting it now causes unnecessary suffering. That night, I dreamed of my childhood home. The details were wrong, impossible architecture and colors that shifted as I looked at them, but the emotional resonance was unmistakable. This place had been safety once, family, belonging. A woman sat by a fire, her back to me. I knew without seeing her face that this was my mother, the one whose features I could no longer recall. When she turned, she had no face at all, just smooth skin, stretched over bone. "You gave me away," she said, her voice emerging from nowhere, "along with everything else that made you my son." I woke, screaming, clawing at sheets soaked with sweat. Dawn light filtered through my window. On my bedside table lay a letter I did not remember receiving, sealed with wax, pressed with the symbol of a many-pointed star. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal. Inside, written in what was now clearly not my handwriting, though once I might have mistaken it for my own. "Corin, your resistance impedes progress. The memories you cling to are chains, not treasures. I have taken the liberty of clearing more space. You will find your power significantly increased as a result. When you no longer remember writing this letter, the transformation will be complete. With anticipation, Corin, I dressed hurriedly and went to my workroom, where I kept my most important research. The grimoire given to me by the emissary sat open on my desk. Pages filled with spells I now realized I had not written consciously. Next to it was my journal, much thinner than it should have been. When I opened it, I found only a single entry, dated that day. My name is Corin Vale. I am a warlock in service to the Whispering Star. Everything else is negotiable. Panic propelled me through my home, searching for any remnant of the messages I had hidden for myself. All gone. I ran to a chest where I kept correspondence, personal items, anything that might anchor my identity. Empty. My library remained, shelves filled with arcane texts. But any book that mentioned my past or contained personal inscriptions had vanished. My home had been methodically stripped of anything that reinforced my humanity. I fled into the streets of Waterdeep, now wealthy and respected enough that people nodded deferentially as I passed. None of them knew me. Not truly. And I realized with horror that I no longer knew them. Faces without names, buildings without memories of their construction, a city that could have been any city. My feet carried me to the docks, to the spot where I had first met the emissary of the Whispering Star. I stood there as ships came and went, merchants hawked wares, sailors sang bawdy songs. Normal human life continued around me, while mine was being systematically erased. An old man selling fish nearby kept glancing at me. Finally, he approached, wringing his scaled hands on his apron. "Master Vale," he said cautiously, "you probably don't remember me." "I'm afraid I don't," I admitted. "Torlin Faversham, you saved my grandson last spring. A water weird had him in the harbour. You pulled him free with your magic, then purged the water from his lungs." His eyes were damp with remembered gratitude. "We pray for you daily, my family and I." I stared at him, searching desperately for any flicker of this memory. Nothing came. "Your grandson," I said softly. "Is he well? Thriving? He speaks often of becoming a great spellcaster like yourself." The old man hesitated. "Though, if I may say, you seem changed since then. Your eyes mostly. Something different in them now." "Yes," I said. "I am changing. For the better, I hope," he asked with genuine concern. I could not answer him. How could I explain that what he was speaking to was less Corin Vale each day? That the being wearing my name and face was becoming something else? Something that would have watched his grandson drown while calculating the alchemical properties of a water weird's essence. I thanked him and continued walking, no destination in mind beyond escape from what my home had become. Night fell, and still I walked, eventually finding myself in a district of temples and shrines. Divine magic was different from the arcane power I wielded, drawn from entities that operated by different rules than my patron. Perhaps there was still a way. I approached a small shrine dedicated to Jurgle, the scribe of the dead. Not a popular deity, but one concerned with the accurate recording of lives and their endings. If any divine power might help preserve what remained of my identity, it seemed a logical choice. The shrine was simple, little more than an alcove with a stone table bearing an inkwell, a quill, and a massive book bound in pale leather. A single elderly priest dozed on a bench nearby. I reached for the quill, intending to record my true name and history before they could be further eroded. The moment my fingers touched the writing instrument, pain exploded behind my eyes. My body went rigid, mouth opening in a silent scream. The world around me fell away. I stood in a vast darkness, surrounded by stars that were not stars but eyes, watching from impossible distances. Before me hovered the entity I knew as the Whispering Star, no longer wearing even the pretense of humanoid form. It appeared as a writhing mass of darkness punctuated by points of cold light, constantly shifting between shapes that human perception could not properly process. Corin Vale. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, felt rather than heard. You test the boundaries of our arrangement. I forced myself to stand straight, to meet those starry points that served as eyes. You deceived me, I said. The true nature of our pact was never explained. All terms were provided. Binding of essence. The fault lies in your mortal assumption that essence referred merely to magical potential. The darkness around the entity rippled, and within it, I glimpsed fragments of my stolen memories. My mother's face, clear for an instant before dissolving again. The University of Morgard, its alabaster towers gleaming in mountain sunlight. Friends whose names I had lost. Lovers whose touch I could no longer recall. Achievements and failures that had shaped the man I once was. You're destroying me, I whispered. I am perfecting you. The entity's form contracted, condensing into something more comprehensible, though still far from human. What use are these fragments of experience? They distract from pure knowledge. They cloud judgment with sentiment. They tether potential to mundane concerns. They make me who I am. They make you less than you could be. The entity drifted closer. Consider what you have already accomplished since our pact. Spells created that no mortal has conceived before. Insights into the nature of reality that have advanced magical theory by centuries. It was true. My work of the past years had earned me acclaim throughout the academic magical community. Innovations that would bear my name for generations to come. At what cost? I asked. When the work is complete, will anything of Corin Vale remain to receive the accolades? Or will it be you wearing my face, accepting recognition for knowledge stolen rather than earned? An irrelevant distinction. The entity's form pulsed with what might have been amusement. I do not replace you, Corin Vale. We merge. Your ambition, your intellect, your magical aptitude remain. Only the extraneous elements are discarded. And if I refuse to continue this merger, the distant star eyes blinked out one by one until only the entity itself remained illuminated. The pact cannot be broken by mortal will. Only completion or death may end it. Then kill me, I said, surprised at my own resolve. If that is what it takes to remain myself until the end, death would be wasteful. The entity's form twisted into a new configuration, and unnecessary. You misunderstand your position, Corin Vale. The transformation is nearly complete. With a gesture like the unfolding of impossible geometries, the entity revealed a vision of myself as I now appeared to others. The differences I had noticed in the mirror were far more pronounced from this external perspective. My posture, my expressions, the very way I occupied physical space, all subtly wrong, not quite human anymore. How much of me remains? I asked, my voice breaking. Approximately 17% of original memory structures, sufficient for basic continuity of identity, insufficient for meaningful resistance. The void around us shimmered, and suddenly I was back in my body before the shrine of Jurgle. The elderly priest was awake now, watching me with concern. "Are you well, my son?" he asked, rising from his bench. "You seemed elsewhere for a moment." I looked down at the quill I still held. The compulsion to write my story, to preserve what little remained of my true self, was overwhelming. But as I dipped the nib into the inkwell, I realized I could no longer be certain what was truth and what was fiction. Had I ever actually had a mother whose face I couldn't remember? Had I studied at a university that might never have existed? "What would you write?" asked the priest, now standing beside me. "My name," I said, "while I still know it is mine." He nodded, seemingly unsurprised. "Many come to Jurgal's shrine when they fear being forgotten, or when they fear forgetting themselves." I pressed quill to page and wrote 5 words. "My name is Corin Vale." The ink glistened black in the candlelight, then slowly shifted, the letters rearranging themselves into symbols I recognized from my grimoire. The language of my patron. The priest leaned forward, squinting at the transformed text. "Most unusual," he murmured. "In all my years tending this shrine, I have never seen the Lord of the End refuse a name." "It's not your God who refuses it," I said. "Something else already owns my name, and nearly everything attached to it." I replaced the quill and turned to leave, despair settling over me like a shroud. The priest caught my arm, his grip surprisingly strong for one so elderly. "Wait," he said. "If your name is lost, perhaps you need a new one." The simplicity of this suggestion stopped me. "A new name. Names have power," he said. "This is known by all who study magic. A new name might not break your bond, but it could create space within it, room to maneuver." Hope flickered, frail but present. "What name would you suggest?" The priest released my arm and returned to the book. He turned to a fresh page and wrote quickly, then sprinkled sand over the wet ink. "I have recorded the death of Corin Vale," he said solemnly, "and the birth of another." He tore the page from the book and pressed it into my hand. "Go now. What exists between you and your patron remains, but perhaps with a new vessel to contain it. The terms of engagement may shift." I left the shrine clutching the page, not daring to read it until I had put considerable distance between myself and the docks. Finally, in the shadow of Waterdeep's eastern wall, I unfolded the parchment. Written in the priest's spidery hand was a name I had never seen before, yet which resonated within me like the echo of a forgotten song. Not my name, but a name that could become mine. A fresh start, unburdened by the agreements made by Corin Vale. For the first time in years, I felt something like optimism. The Whispering Star had claimed Corin Vale, piece by piece. But perhaps this new identity could create a sanctuary within myself, a core that would remain unviolated by our pact. I returned to my home with new purpose. The being that shared my mind was aware of what had transpired, of course. I could feel its amusement at what it perceived as a futile gesture. "Names are merely sounds," my reflection said when I faced the mirror again. "They hold no inherent power beyond what belief grants them." "Then you have nothing to fear from my new one," I replied. "Fear is as irrelevant as hope," it said with my mouth. "The process continues regardless of what you call yourself." That night, I dreamed of the chamber beneath Waterdeep again. The ageless woman waited for me, now wearing my face almost perfectly, with only subtle wrongness in the eyes. "You think your little clerical trick changes anything?" she asked, her voice now indistinguishable from mine. "The pact is with your essence, not your name." "Perhaps," I said, "but you yourself told me that names have power, that the star knows my name." "Knew your name," she corrected. "Now it knows much more than that." "Yet, not everything," I countered. "Not yet." She circled me, predatory and calculating. "What do you hope to achieve?" "The transformation is nearly complete. In weeks, perhaps days, the last of what you consider your true self will be absorbed, unless I find a way to break the pact." "There is no breaking it," she snapped. "Only completion or death." "So you have said." I met her gaze, steadily. "But I wonder, if that were truly the case, why you would bother to confront me here. Why not simply let the process conclude?" For the first time, I saw uncertainty cross her features. Because your resistance causes unnecessary suffering, she said, but there was a defensive note in her voice. The star wishes for a harmonious merger. No, I said, understanding blooming. The star fears something. What can threaten a cosmic entity? Not me, surely. Not directly. She said nothing, but the dreamscape around us darkened. Unless, I continued, thinking aloud, the pact itself creates vulnerability, a connection that flows both ways. I stepped closer to her. What happens to the star if I die before the transformation is complete? Not just my body, but my essence, my identity. Irreparable harm, she whispered, then looked shocked at her own admission. The dreamscape shattered, and I woke in my bed, heart racing but mind clearer than it had been in months. The entity had revealed a critical weakness. Our connection, the very thing that allowed it to consume me, also created risk for it. If I were to die while still retaining some portion of my original self, the star would suffer. How, exactly, I couldn't say. But harm to a cosmic entity was no small thing. I spent the next day in careful preparation. I wrote everything down, all that I had learned, all that I suspected, using the new name given to me by the priest of Jurgle. These writings I sealed with wax mixed with my blood, a minor ward against tampering by my passenger. When night fell, I made my way to the highest tower of Waterdeep, a seldom used observatory maintained by the watchful order of magists and protectors. I had legitimate access, my academic reputation opening doors that would otherwise remain closed. Alone among the astronomical instruments, beneath a glass dome that offered an unobstructed view of the night sky, I spread my notes and opened my grimoire. Over the years, pages multiplying to contain the knowledge granted by my patron, I traced the symbol on its cover, the many-pointed star that represented the entity I had bound myself to. With my other hand, I clutched the page bearing my new name. "I know you can hear me," I said to the empty air. "I know you watch through my eyes, listen through my ears." The air grew chill around me. Stars visible through the glass dome seemed to brighten and pulse in unnatural rhythm. "Speak your mind, Warlock," came a voice from behind me. I turned to find the ageless woman standing there, no longer bothering with the pretense of being my reflection. She wore my face like an ill-fitting mask, her movements too fluid, too precise. "I wish to renegotiate our pact." She laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the circular chamber. "Pacts are not negotiations. They are bindings, absolute and irreversible," I countered. "All bindings can be severed, given the right tools. You have no such tools." She moved closer. "The transformation is nearly complete. Why fight what you yourself set in motion?" "Because I now understand what I did not then," I said. "Power without self is meaningless. Knowledge without context is empty. Philosophy from a dying consciousness," she sneered. "Soon such concerns will seem as primitive to you as an infant's babbling seems to a sage." "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "But before that happens, I offer you a choice." Her expression shifted to one of amused indulgence. "What choice could you possibly offer the whispering star? Peaceful completion or mutual destruction?" I held up the page with my new name. "This identity remains unclaimed by our pact, a fragment of selfhood beyond your reach, however small. A clerical trick," she dismissed. "Nothing more, perhaps, but enough to anchor what remains of my original self. Enough that if this body dies now, the shock would reverberate along our connection. The star would feel it, would it not?" Her smile faltered. "You would not destroy yourself. Your ambition would not permit it. My ambition was to enhance my life, not surrender it," I said, echoing words I had spoken to my reflection days before. If those are truly the only options, then oblivion is preferable to becoming a mere vessel. I stepped to the edge of the observatory platform. Below, the city of Waterdeep spread out, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. "Here is my offer," I said. "Return what you have taken. Restore my memories, my identity, myself. In exchange, I will continue to serve as your warlock, to channel your power into this world, to further your influence through my work." "Impossible," she said, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. "What is consumed cannot be returned." "Not consumed," I corrected. "Transformed. The star remembers everything, does it not?" "That is what you told me." "Nothing truly gone, merely put to better use." She was silent, her form flickering slightly, as if the connection was unstable. "If I must die to remain myself, so be it," I continued. "But consider what you lose. No more insights flowing into this world through my research. No more influence spreading through my growing network of scholars and students. No more spells bearing the subtle mark of the star, entering the arcane traditions of mortals." The air around us seemed to thicken, pressure building as if before a storm. When she spoke again, her voice overlapped with others, a chorus of tones, suggesting she was no longer speaking, only for herself. "What assurance have we that you would honor this new arrangement?" "The same that I had when I first accepted the pact," I replied. Faith in mutual benefit. "And should we refuse?" I spread my arms. "Then it ends here. What remains of Corin Vale dies tonight, taking with it a portion of the star's investment. A loss for both of us, but one I am prepared to accept." The pressure in the air intensified, fabric of reality seeming to bend around us. The woman's form dissolved into swirling darkness, punctuated by points of light, the true appearance of the whispering star manifesting partially in our realm. "You would threaten an entity beyond your comprehension." The voice boomed, no longer bothering with human pretense. "Your existence is but a mote in the vastness of my awareness." "Yet you chose me," I countered. "Out of countless mortals you selected Corin Vale. There must have been a reason beyond random chance." The darkness swirled, contracting and expanding like the breathing of some cosmic beast. The star points within it flared and dimmed in patterns that hurt my eyes to follow. "Your mind had unique properties, structures conducive to our merger. Then you would be foolish to destroy them." "Symbiosis implies equality," the entity rumbled. "You are not my equal. Mortal. Not in power, no," I agreed. "But in necessity, perhaps. You need a foothold in this world, a channel for your influence. I need knowledge and power beyond what my mortal limitations would otherwise permit." I held up the page bearing my new name, then carefully placed it atop my grimoire. "This new identity remains untouched by our pact. It can serve as the foundation for a restructured agreement, one that allows me to serve as your warlock without surrendering my essential self." The darkness churned in what might have been consideration. When it spoke again, the voice had modulated, becoming slightly less overwhelming. "What precisely do you propose?" "Return what memories you can of myself. Original self," I said. "Not all at once, if that would be too disruptive, but gradually. Allow me to reconstruct who I was, while moving forward as who I am becoming. In exchange, I will continue to channel your power, to further your influence, to develop magical innovations that bear your subtle mark, and the consumption of your essence ends," I said firmly. "You may have what I freely give, but no more." The entity's form contracted sharply, as if in pain or anger. The observatory trembled, instruments rattling against tables. For a moment, I thought I had miscalculated, that the star would rather destroy us both than accept my terms. Then, slowly, the darkness began to recede, condensing once more into humanoid shape. Not the ageless woman of our first meeting, nor my own stolen face, but something between, features blurred and uncertain. Such terms are unprecedented, it said, voice still layered with inhuman overtones but no longer painfully overwhelming. The customary progression of a Warlock pact does not allow for renegotiation. Then let this be the first, I said. Surely a being of your vast experience sees the value in innovation. A sound like distant thunder rolled through the observatory, which I somehow understood to be laughter. Indeed, Corin Vale, innovation is precisely why you were chosen. The figure moved closer, its form becoming more defined with each step. Your mind, with its particular patterns of connection and synthesis, offered unique possibilities. Possibilities best preserved by keeping that mind intact, I pressed. The figure stopped before me, now solid enough that it cast a shadow in the starlight streaming through the dome. Its face had settled into a compromise between masculine and feminine, neither fully mine nor fully other. Very well, it said. I accept your proposal, with conditions. I tensed. What conditions? First, what has already been taken cannot be fully returned. The transformation has progressed too far. I can restore some memories, some connections, but you will never again be exactly the man who made that first blood pact. This I had expected. Acceptable, provided enough is restored that I recognize myself. Second, our bond remains. You will continue to draw upon my power, to serve as my channel into your world, to develop magical innovations that carry my influence, so long as the exchange is consensual rather than predatory. The figure nodded. Third, you will bear a permanent mark of our connection, a visible sign that you belong in part to the star. I hesitated at this. What sort of mark? Your eyes will retain their current appearance, it said, windows through which I may observe your world, though I shall no longer control the body they belong to. I thought of the old fishmonger's comment about my changed eyes, a small price to pay. Agreed. And finally, the figure said, its form beginning to dissolve again into darkness, you will teach others the truth of what Warlock pacts entail, not merely the power gained, but the cost exacted. Those who would follow your path must do so with full understanding. I nodded slowly. That I will gladly do. The darkness engulfed me, and with it came pain unlike anything I had experienced. My mind felt as if it were being turned inside out, memories flooding back in chaotic torrents. My mother's face, clear again after so long forgotten. The University of Morgard, where I had indeed studied briefly before lack of funds forced my departure. Friends, lovers, enemies, all returning in a jumbled rush that left me gasping and disoriented. When my vision cleared, I stood alone in the observatory. The grimoire lay open on the floor, its pages now filled with two distinct handwritings intertwining, mine and something more angular and precise. The page, with my new name, had vanished. I approached the nearest reflective surface, a polished brass telescope. In its curved surface, I saw my face, more familiar now than it had been in months, though subtle differences remained. And my eyes, as promised, were changed. The irises now contained points of light, like distant stars visible at the bottom of a well. Over the following weeks, the restored memories continued to settle, finding their proper places in the chronology of my life. Some returned, fully formed and vivid. Others remained fragmentary, glimpses rather than complete recollections. And some, I came to accept, were truly gone, consumed beyond recovery. Yet I was myself again, or close enough to recognize the man in the mirror. The power granted by my pact remained, as did the knowledge that had come with it. But now, when I cast spells or developed new magical theories, I did so with conscious choice rather than compulsion. The Whispering Star still communicated with me, though more distantly than before. I felt its presence most strongly when working complex magic or when gazing at the night sky. Occasionally, insights would come to me in dreams, offered rather than imposed. True to my final promise, I began to document the true nature of Warlock pacts, not the sanitized accounts found in academic texts, but the raw reality of what it means to bind oneself to entities beyond mortal comprehension. I wrote of the exchange of essence, the risk to identity, the gradual transformation that can consume the unwary practitioner. Some called my writings heresy against established magical tradition. Others dismissed them as the ravings of a mind damaged by too much contact with otherworldly powers. But among those truly drawn to the Warlock's path, my accounts found receptive readers. Young scholars would seek me out, hungry for power, but hesitant to pay unknown prices. To them, I would show my star-flecked eyes and tell my story. Some turned away, choosing the slower but safer path of wizardry. Others proceeded with their pacts, but with clearer understanding and stronger protections for their essential selves. Years have passed since that night in the observatory. My reputation has grown, though not always in ways that please the magical establishment. I am sought out as often for my insights into the nature of pacts as for my arcane innovations. I know now that I walk a precarious path. The Whispering Star honors our revised agreement, but I sense its patience is vast. Perhaps it waits for me to grow complacent, to lower my guard, to once again become vulnerable to complete consumption. Or perhaps it truly values the arrangement we have forged, appreciating the unique benefits of a willing partner rather than a hollowed vessel. I cannot know its true intentions. Such is the fundamental uncertainty of dealing with entities that exist beyond mortal comprehension. But I have learned to live with this uncertainty, to find balance within it. Each night, I gaze up at the stars with eyes that partly belong to one of their number. I feel the vastness of cosmos and my own insignificance within it. Yet I also feel the value of what I fought to preserve, the uniquely human perspective that even cosmic entities may find worth experiencing. My name is Corin Vale, though I carry another name known only to myself and the entity I serve. I am a Warlock of the Whispering Star, not its puppet, not its vessel, but its partner in a dangerous dance of power and identity. I tell you my story not as warning, though heed it as such if you wish. I tell it rather as testament to the truth that all power has its price. The question is never whether you will pay, but what currency will be demanded, and whether you can afford the cost. If you seek the Warlock's path, do so with eyes open. Know what you offer before blood is spilled and pacts are sealed. Remember that knowledge without self is empty, and power without identity is meaningless. And if one day you find a patron's influence growing beyond what was agreed, remember this: even cosmic entities can be negotiated with, if you understand what they truly value and what they truly fear. Look to the stars, but keep your feet planted firmly in who you are. That balance, precarious as it may be, is the true art of the Warlock's path.